Welcome to Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. In this podcast, we delve into the non-clinical aspects of dentistry with inspirational guests from across the profession. You will hear incredible life stories, pick up valuable business tips and be entertained. I'm Andy Acton and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Drevens.
What an enjoyable conversation with Oliver.
Fascinating, really. I mean, someone so young has experienced quite a lot.
Well, I mean, I don't want to kind of give too much away what's in the episode, but studying overseas, family practice, setting a practice, buying a practice, and his honesty around that fitness to practice issue as well, and telling that whole story. I think it's really important. We know from our conversations it's something that's constantly kind of sitting there tapping dentists on the shoulder, the fear of a GDC complaint.
Yeah, definitely.
But to hear his story of how that panned out and how it went and how it affected him as well, I think it's a really interesting story, but I think a really powerful one to be told as well.
And so lots of crammed in 11 years.
Absolutely. So here we are again. Welcome. How you doing, Chris?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. Looking forward to this again.
Pleased to hear it. So today we are back. We are recording more podcasts for Dentology, which is exciting.
It is.
So today we are delighted. We have a dentist, a practice owner, husband and father, and his name is Oliver Pierce. Welcome, Oliver. How are you doing?
Yeah. Hi, Oliver.
Good morning. I'm very well, gents. Thank you very much. Are you both okay?
Yeah, we're very good. Very good indeed.
Yeah. Looking forward to having a chat.
Yeah.
No snow, so that's good.
No, it's been a funny week, hasn't it? We started with snow and now we've got glorious sunshine.
Yeah, looking out the window, I just saw some bloke go past on his parachute.
Really?
Yeah, some bloke just parachuted over there, which is, sorry, for those of you ever listening to this and you have no idea what I'm talking about, but it was like, well, that's a bit odd. Don't often see that occur in Brookman's Park. But anyway, moving on.
There we go. So back to the moment we're here for, which is to chat to Oliver. So, Oliver, both of your parents were dentists, and you say that the only topic around the dining room table was dentistry. So I guess the odds were stacked in your favour in terms of being a dentist.
If you view it as a positive, no, yeah. So,
there's the thought,
yeah. So Mum and Dad met at Liverpool Dental School. Mum never wanted to be a dentist. This was back in the days when if you weren't good enough for medicine, they said, you're not good enough for us, but the dental school will have you.
Oh, wow.
Excellent.
Obviously now it's gone completely full circle. And my dad, bit of a strange one really. He grew up in a little market town called Prague in North Lincolnshire, and lived quite an unfortunate upbringing. He lost his dad really young, and he saw the local dentist driving around in a Jag, and decided, I want to do what he does, and worked really hard, got himself into the grammar school. And he always told me about how when he went for his interview at Liverpool Dental School, my grandmother said to him, don't tell them that your dad used to work in the steelworks. Don't tell them, sort of with a view that was a bad thing. Both got into Liverpool. My dad was the year ahead of my mum. And then my dad qualified and bought a practice in 1984 in Wolverhampton through Frank Taylor Associates.
Brilliant.
Back in the day. And then eventually moved to Sheffield and then set up in Hull. So I'm the second of four, the only dentist, though my elder brother is married to a dentist. And yeah, it was everywhere really. I for years I couldn't figure out what it was, the smell, but it was the eugenol, it was the cloves.
Nice.
That sort of classic dentist smell. And it was the topic around the dinner table every night was, how are we doing with this? How are we doing with that? Staffing, extensions, plans.
I've just got in my head Christmas round the Pierce household with all of those people in there. Should we discuss an endo treatment today?
Probably not endo, but probably this was back in the day of fee per item, so it was probably the good old days of how much did you gross today?
Yeah,
where it was just a constant one-upmanship of how much did you generate. So I knew from a relatively early age, I think, that dentistry was the path that I wanted to follow. My mum always tried to persuade me against it. My dad never sort of fully encouraged me to do it, but I could sort of tell inside he would, the thought of his son going on to do dentistry was amazing for him.
Oliver, did he buy a Jag?
He didn't get a jag. No.
So I was wondering if he bought a jag.
He didn't get the jag in the end, unfortunately. And I just knew it was what I wanted to do. I could never really sort of put my finger on why.
Was that from quite a young age, Oliver? Were you quite young when that dawned on you that dentistry would be your future?
I'd say I was about 12 or 13, and I knew that was the way I wanted to go. But I also think I was really, really lucky and really fortunate. I think if you know that from that age that you want to go into, say, healthcare, doctor, dentistry, your path's kind of laid out quite easily for you. And I actually know a few people who didn't really know where they wanted life to take them. And that's quite tricky in a sense, because you've got to make your decisions at sort of 14, 15 for your GCSEs, and then that leads into the A levels. And I think we pigeonhole ourselves quite early on in England.
Definitely.
Very early on, and particularly like you say, if it's a qualification that you have to take for professional standards reasons, lawyer, accountant, dentist, doctor, you have to make those decisions in your mid-teens. People at that age, most people, myself included, I had no idea what I wanted to do. No. So I agree with you that in many ways you were I still don't know what I want to do.
Not for a job. I know what I wanted to do, but not for a job. Yeah.
But so for you, I get what you're saying, that you felt fortunate in that it gave you that pathway in terms of choosing the right O-levels, GCSEs onto A-levels. That pathway was much more mapped out for you than for many people.
Yeah, I think if you compare us with like the American system, where they go and do the college and then they major in whatever it might be, they don't have to make those decisions till much, much later. But I think, as I say, I feel really lucky that I knew from such an early age the path that I wanted to take. It didn't stop me from doing my best not to do it. And to say I knew what I wanted to do, I really should have worked a bit harder. But I guess everything happens.
Did we have a bit of party time at university?
Well, it was more before that, to be honest.
Really? Your run-up?
Yeah, my run-up was quite a staggered run-up. And I didn't work as hard as I should have done in my AS levels, my A levels. And then I was unsuccessful getting a place into dental school.
Okay.
I applied and got rejections. And then my mum had actually heard sort of down the grapevine that you could study abroad. And she wrote into the Times education section, actually. I don't know why, because we never met the Times.
The Times education supplement.
And
online now.
They published her letter, did a full 2-page spread about studying in Prague in particular. And I applied, and I remember very vividly that the admissions tutor said, "So your mum and dad are dentists?" I said, "Yes." He said, "So you've got the disease in your blood?" I said, "Yeah, I've got it there."
Wow.
And had a gap year. Then off I went to Prague.
What's interesting, Oliver, you saying about you didn't perhaps apply yourself to the extent you should have when you did your AS and A levels. The amount of people we hear who have a knockback of some sort early on, but that builds resilience, doesn't it? And I think so many people, where things just keep going in your favour and working out, and you have success, not experiencing failure until perhaps later in life, it can be quite a hard lesson because you've not equipped yourself with how to deal with it. But having that lesson relatively early in your life probably wasn't a bad thing in terms of understanding that you need to be resilient and you need to apply yourself, because not everything just falls in your lap. Just because your parents were dentists, that was no passage of right for you to suddenly just walk that same path and become a dentist. No, exactly.
I think if I'm honest, I probably was guilty of thinking that, I'd had a very fortunate upbringing, and I maybe was guilty of just thinking I would waltz into it and it would be handed to me on the plate. And, being unsuccessful in getting into UK dental schools definitely did bring me crashing back down in a good way. So I think everything happens for a reason. I ended up in Prague, had a fantastic time, and if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't be talking to you today. So,
And did you? Was it? Well, I can't remember. Was it Kunal who had to do everything in Czech? Was it? Didn't he have to write everything in Czech? Is that the same for you? Yeah. So I think all his lectures or everything he submitted had to be in Czech or something.
So ours was taught in English. We had to learn the language with a view that you would be okay to speak to patients on clinics come 3rd and 4th year. Wow. The reality was not the case. We obviously, you prioritize, and knowing that sort of the anatomy or the physiology was going to be more important later on in your sort of university career. Check. I was quite good at it, but I know a lot of my cohort just did not apply themselves to it at all. It wasn't as much as important as some of the other subjects.
Right. Were there a few English people there, or
yeah? So it was a real mixed bag. So I got there, and on the sort of the introductory day, getting toured around, this girl came to me and she said, "Your name's Oliver?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oliver Pierce?" I said,
No.
"Yeah." She said, "Oh, we've got mutual friends," and she went to the other secondary school just down the road from me, and I'd obviously
Flipping heck.
been a topic of conversation, which I've never got to the bottom of, and maybe I don't want to know. And then
do you remember that staggered start?
and then there was a guy from a town called Driffield, which is like 15 minutes down the road. Such a small world. But then the flip side is there was people there from the Philippines, Botswana, Canada. There was an Australian guy.
Really eclectic, yeah.
So it was a real melting pot, I would say. And yeah, so.
And what was the overall experience like? We've had. Interestingly, you're our third guest on that studied in the Czech Republic. We had Kunal Patel and also Indy Johal, but you studied in Prague. What was that whole experience like? Did you enjoy it? Was it good? Did you kind of almost create this like sub community of dental students, but not spend much time? Yeah. Yeah, was it kind of you were out with the hen and stag do's every weekend?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a really interesting experience. I mean, when I got there, Prague was unbelievably cheap. So there was a pub in my apartment block, and a pint was 60 pence a pint. So that's
just to put some time frame around this was what the late 2000s, around 2010,
2007
right.
was when I went. So
right.
The Charles University in Prague has had the international faculty for about 25 years now. So it's one of the more established ones. But when you scratch the surface, there are so many places that people can study abroad. Hungary, all the way up to sort of like Lithuania. Spain's really coming to the fore with a lot of
Valencia at the moment is quite popular, isn't it?
Yeah, Valencia and Madrid as well. So it was quite a small community, I would say. There was only 15 in my cohort of dentists, with medicine of about 100. So it wasn't a big university by those standards, but it was good. It had its advantages and disadvantages. Those of you that have been to Prague will know it's a beautiful city.
Yeah, fabulous.
Cheap beer that's excellent. Very nice looking women, and just all things considered, really great place.
I was going to say,
for those of you who are listening,
for those that aren't watching this on YouTube, Oliver did just look over his shoulder and make sure the coast was clear.
Just checking my wife's not cracked in, but then the flip side is it could be a really lonely place. My dad became ill while I was at university. And he sadly passed away in my fourth year of university. And that was very difficult because I wanted to study at Leeds, which is 45 minutes from my house, door to door. Prague, it's a flight. It's it's a full day to sort of get back and forth, and that obviously was challenging. So it could also be quite a lonely place, I would say. And you sort of, it's quite a strange feeling. Most of your listeners will never have had this, but where you're walking down the street and everybody's speaking a foreign language to you, you feel quite
isolated.
Yeah, I'd say isolated. And then I was the first year of national recruitment for foundation dentists. So it came to my final year, and I was applying, and I was fortunate enough to secure a VT position in my 5th ranked scheme, which was my home city of Hull. So it was quite nice knowing that I was genuinely coming home. I was coming back to Hull.
So even though you did your study in Prague, you could complete your VT year back in the UK.
Yes. So,
and was that common for lots of the students? Did lots of the students go back to their home country?
Yeah, the vast majority went back to their home country.
Right, okay.
There was 3 English guys on my course, and I was the only one to secure a VT place. But yeah, the vast majority of people went back to sort of where they were from. A couple did stay in Prague, to be fair. But yeah, so all worked out really. I got my 5th rank scheme, Hull. Came back for the selection day, and I chose to go to a really nice guy called Chris Challens, who owned a practice in the centre of Hull. Always be sort of indebted to Chris. He taught me an awful lot. The tuition over in Prague, it had some really good elements and it had some really bad elements as well. So I walked out of university and I could section teeth. I could do really nice composites, but I'd done one amalgam and I'd never done a root canal from start to finish.
Right.
And so it took me a bit longer to become registered with the GDC just because of some of the delays with the Czech side of things. So I kind of came to Chris in the September, and he took me under his wing. He taught me an awful lot. I'll always be indebted to him. And it sort of inspired me that I would love to go on and be a trainer in due course.
Right.
Okay.
I think.
And I guess that's one of the risks, isn't it, of studying overseas, that I guess our program over here is designed for UK dentistry, whereas it may be that actually it's a great experience, and within the Czech Republic it might meet the needs of that patient base, but if it doesn't translate to here, it's great that you got a mentor in somebody that you know, we're not big on dental puns, but it filled the gaps, didn't it?
Yeah.
The bits that you hadn't kind of finessed at dental school, he helped you with that to get you through.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important that if anybody is going to take, you know, the abroad path that you do when you come out of that you are in a practice that can fully support you. Because if I'd have been let loose on UDAs and all the rest of it without somebody to hold my hand at times, I'd have been completely lost. So that was a really good experience. Really enjoyed my VT year. Learnt an awful lot. And then it was coming towards the end of my VT year, and I was sort of thinking about what do I do now? And I'd really enjoyed the practice that I was in. I felt for me and my learning, it would be best for me to stay in that practice and continue to sort of learn from Chris. And I remember very vividly, my mum sat me down one night and basically said, "You're coming back to the practice. One of the associates is leaving. You're coming to work for us." There was no two ways about it, really. It was you are coming back.
No choice.
Yeah, no choice. You're coming. She had an associate, a lovely associate that worked with her for a long time, and she was pregnant with her 2nd child, and she'd said, "I'm going back to Lithuania to raise my child." So it was pretty open and shut. You're coming.
And how was that working as a family? Obviously, yeah, we go back to those dinner table conversations. It was kind of all the chat, but on a day-to-day basis, and all being kind of, you know, qualified clinicians now. What was that like? Was it easy and relaxed? Was it quite tense at times?
I think it was more tense than relaxed.
Right.
So yeah, so a bit of a sort of a unique setup, really. So there was my mum as sort of practice owner. There was my elder brother as the practice manager, myself as, you know, associate dentist. My elder brother's wife was an associate working there, and there was my younger brother.
It's a proper family affair, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if we're being honest, I think it was a bit too much, because you know, no matter, I was living at home at this point. You know, I was 25 and living at home with all of that, and it was too much, if we're being honest.
It probably felt like your world was quite small.
Yeah, my world was
a bit like the Pierce Mafia.
Yeah,
sort of. Yeah, it was really small. It was too small, and I think it did get better when I moved out and bought my first house. But nevertheless, you know, when your mum is your boss, and your brother is kind of almost your line manager as such. It's just it was too much. And I think combination of that and the constant battles to get associates. I mean, we had very stable associates, but obviously, you know, here in 2023, we know about the recruitment retention crisis. In places like Hull, this has been a problem for 10, 15 years. Getting associates, good quality associates, getting, you know, good team members. Obviously, it's exacerbated now and it's worse, and it's awful to see the entire profession struggling. But in Hull, we've you know, we're no strangers to this rodeo. We're used to it, and we eventually decided. I remember very vividly one Friday afternoon, and we'd had another associate that had said, "I'm off. I've been offered this. I'm going. I'm taking it." And we just, as a family, decided that the time had come for us to step back from practice ownership. And we approached a broker, and the broker said, "This won't go to the open market," and contacted 3 dental body corporates who had a little bit of haggling, and one of them made us an offer that we chose to accept.
Right, and that was towards the end of 2016, was it?
So
right. So you worked as a family together for a number of years. It was kind of a 3 or 4 year process in the run up to this.
Yeah. So we that finally went through in October 2016, and then I think it's fair to say the wheels very firmly came off. If I'm being honest, I think we underestimated how difficult it would be to let go. And even though I was, still sort of an associate for argument's sake, this was my mum and dad's practice. This was their life's work. 65,000 UDAs, 4,000 UOAs, 10 surgeries.
It's a big place.
It was a monster.
Lots of delivery required.
Yeah, and it's funny. We talked to lots of people about this very point. Obviously, in another life, we've only sell dental practices, as you know, and we say to people, trying to prepare yourself emotionally for no longer owning your business. When you say it, people nod, and it's like, no, you really need to understand this is no longer going to be yours. Once the money changes hands and you pass the keys over, you're no longer in charge. And what that owner now does with it, in terms of if they change the culture or the decoration or the coffee or the radio station or whatever it might be, that's for them to do. It's no longer yours. And I think quite a lot of people do find that kind of emotional separation.
I think the
quite
team
tricky.
find it hard, don't they? Because it's the same people but different owners, and it's like, oh, hang on a minute, who do I go to?
There was an awful lot of friction, and I can reflect on it now and think I certainly didn't carry myself in glory with it. I think I was massively unprepared for accepting that by joining a corporate, they were going to put their corporate branding on it, they were going to put their corporate procedures, their policies in place, the uniforms were going to change, and sort of you can't have your cake and eat it. And that process taught me an awful lot. I mean, you can argue it's either way. Do you go with the gung-ho approach and just on day one change the paint, change the uniforms, change the logo, or do you do it subtly and slowly? I decided very quickly that if I was ever going to take a practice over, I would not have done it as fast as they did. But it also made me realise just how much I needed to own my own practice, and spurred me on for, not immediately, but knowing that at some point I was always going to struggle working for somebody else, and I needed to have that autonomy and the ability to have things sort of how
So it was a learning process. Whilst it was hard and it was challenging, you still took a lot from it.
There's always a push and a pull, isn't there?
Yeah, it kind of put you on a path to move forward. I mean, we'll get to the practice you own in a second, because you bought that practice towards the end of 2020, which is an interesting time frame given what was happening with COVID and everything. So from selling the practice and to that point, did you stay on working as an associate? Did you go and work somewhere else as an associate? What was that kind of intervening period looking like?
So I stayed for, it was about 15 months.
Right.
I'd handed my notice in twice, and then on the third time I decided, I remember very vividly one night, it was the first night of the Ashes down in Brisbane, and I just couldn't sleep, and I was shaking, and I just thought, this isn't right. This is not right. Work should not make you feel this way.
No.
And I had about 2 hours sleep. I marched into work. I printed it off, and I just said, I'm done. I'm out. I can't work like this. It's not good for me. We lost 27 nurses and receptionists in an 18-month period, and
Wow.
I was the 8th clinician to leave in 18 months. It was a massive upheaval, and what I sort
for
of
you,
realized,
this must have been quite hard as what was your family practice.
So there's a big pressure,
yeah,
especially if there's a deferred element based on a performance. You've got that hanging over you, haven't you? That you don't want to let your mum down.
But there's so much tied up in it. There's the deferred consideration. There's the family connection. There's the emotional stuff. It's a real roller coaster.
It is, and these are all things that I know that in 25 years I'm going to have to consider, because I do think I think it was the best thing for our family was to join the corporate, but yeah, it did put us through the mill, that process. And as you say, when you've got deferred considerations, you've got to loop all that back in. I know that 18 months was the longest 18 months of my life. I know that all happened while my youngest was, she was 4 months old when that took over. And to be honest, it was all a bit of a blur looking back. I was so preoccupied with work, with what was going on with that. So yeah, it's a really difficult decision for principals when they're looking for their exit strategy, because I did 18 months and I underestimated those 18 months, and that took a huge toll on me, and it was really difficult. Some principals are tied into 3 years, 4 years, 5 years with increased deferred considerations, and that's really tough.
With minimal control.
Yeah. So, jumping forward, on the 2nd of November 2020, you then proudly took over as a principal of Sutton Dental Practice, which is a more uplifting part. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a drawn-out process, to be honest. So, I obviously, like most people in the local practice do, you register with every broker. You contact all the different brokers out there, and you get yourself signed up to newsletters and prospectus and stuff. And actually, the practice that I finally bought, I'd actually viewed while I was serving my sentence with the corporate, but it was within my geographical non-compete clause,
right? Restricted area,
Given how things were going, I just was not prepared to take a risk, and then it sold subject to contract. And again, what will be. And then it came back on the market, and I came in November 2019, and viewed it, and I made the principal an offer. But just linking back to what we said, I made him 2 offers, one based on a handshake, here's you can go, and another one based on, I want you to stay for a year as a transition year. So even though I had obviously seen how difficult it was for people when they sell, I also knew that I didn't think it was right for me just to completely take the keys. I kind of wanted to have somebody there to even just to do some of the delivery of the UDAs, just to sort of be that sort of transition phase. And he agreed to stay for a year. I sourced finance through one of the high street banks. And then obviously in March 2020, the world stopped turning, and within about 3 or 4 days, the gentleman at that bank said, "Nope, we're not lending you. We're not lending you anymore." So I had this practice that I'd started working in to sort of get my feet under the table, to get the lay of the land. The whole team knew that I was, looking to take the practice over, but no finance in place. So I'm again very much indebted to a gentleman by the name of Malcolm Swan, who works for Lloyd's.
Good guy, Malcolm.
Really, really good guy. Saw a lot of me on Zoom through COVID, and managed to agree some finance and get the deal back on the road. So all done conveyancing through FTA Law, and the guys up in Leeds. Louisa in particular was fantastic in doing all the due diligence and going through everything with an iron comb. And then we finally got it over the line on the 2nd of November 2020. Here's your keys, off you go.
So obviously because of lockdown was the 23rd of March 2020 to the 8th of June 2020. So you've got this window where you weren't legally allowed to operate other than kind of emergency care, and then you took over in November. So what was those first few months like? Because I mean, in some ways, it's not all bad news, because I know you're in the family practice, but this is your practice. You're the principal, so it's not that you've done it before, so you've got no reference point. So you just started as a principal coming out the back of lockdown. But what were those first few months like?
In time, really, because you also didn't have to do all your UDAs. So I wonder how that sort of works as well.
I think that's the biggest point, Chris. To be fair, that was the biggest advantage for me. I mean, the practice that I bought was 98% NHS, 2 contracts.
It gave you some breathing space in a weird way, didn't it?
A soft landing. I know it's still a bit crappy because it was after COVID, and the reality of it is we just kept popping in and out of lockdowns, didn't we, really?
Yeah.
I think it
when's
works.
The next one going to be?
I think it works really well, actually, for me. I had, a period where ultimately the UDA delivery wasn't a big concern. So, if you think about sort of KPIs and that sort of stuff, this was, that one was just completely not an issue. We knew that the targets as such were quite minimal, non-restrictive, and very easy to hit. And that enabled me to do some of the things around the practice that I wanted to do. To put this into context, when I bought the practice, it had 7,000 paper record cards in reception. It needed a refurb, it needed paint, it needed a bit of a ripping out in places. Nothing overhauling, but little things that you can tell it's the same building, but actually make a real difference when you walk in.
Yep.
Just to put my stamp on it. But again, I could see the previous principal who was doing a day a week. I could see that every week he'd come in, he was a little bit almost like a dagger to his heart, seeing what I'd done with the reception, seeing what I'd done with the waiting room.
Interesting, isn't it?
But I also imagine there probably was a sensitivity on your part, because you've been on the other end of that when you talked through that process of your mother selling the practice to the corporate and how that felt for you. So whilst you were making changes, I would imagine there was also part of you that understood how that might feel.
Was he an older guy? Was he much older?
Yeah, so he was in his late 50s, and he.
Oh, that's quite old.
It is quite old.
Yeah, Chris is just turned 60, so I'm still
You
very
don't
early
look it,
50s.
mate.
Thanks
very
early
much.
50s,
Thank
so
you.
I can say that's pretty old.
Good man. I like Oliver. He's a lovely bloke.
And he'd had enough. He'd had enough. He'd done 20 years of smashing out UDAs, running between 2 surgeries, seeing 70, 80 people a day. He'd had enough, and I think it was that sort of balance between what I thought would work best for me, which was to not be clogged up just in surgery, but also to enable the staff to get to know me a little bit better, to have almost a bit of counsel as well, because I would involve him in not involve him as such, but I would ask his opinion on some of the things that I was considering weighing up. And we decided at the end of March, so 5 months after taking over, I had an associate. My associate was leaving; she was going fully private. I'd managed to find a lovely dentist that works for me now, and had agreed to join the practice. I had a therapist coming on board, and it just seemed like the right time to sort of to
Part company.
On good terms. We shook hands. We agreed, because we had a really minute, like 3% deferred element based on some bits and bobs, and we agreed on a figure for that, and we shook hands, and and I've not seen him since. I think I've had 2 messages since. He's off on his ride on lawnmower.
Good for him.
Living his life. Yeah, good for him. Absolutely. And it worked.
And sometimes it's nice to cut things just before it starts to get a little bit awkward, so everyone can leave with a smile on their face, a good feeling, than try and kind of milk it for that last 1 or 2%.
Yeah, I think we were definitely there. I think I felt happier with sort of my understanding of the building and the practice and the team. And I could see that with every Thursday that he came in, there was a little bit less of his heart in it. And above all else, you when you are obviously managing, you've got to spot those signs, and you're better sometimes just to shake hands and say thank you very much. Do you want to call it a day? We did, and that worked. That worked well, really.
You've done a lot's happened to you in your dental career so far, from an interesting qualification period, your VT, getting in the family business, selling that business, buying your own practice. How would you kind of bookend it at the moment in terms of your best and worst days in business? Because a lot's gone on, a lot's happened. What would you say?
And you've only just started.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. You're a relatively new practice owner, but if we kind of drew a line now, what's been your best and worst day in business so far?
I think best days harder to answer. My worst days is really, really easy. Really, really vivid for me. I put some anaesthetic in a patient. I'd numbed her up last October, and I came down and I just checked my emails, and I had an email from the GDC from a caseworker saying, "Can you confirm your address? We've got something to post to you." And I looked down and it said fitness to practice caseworker. I thought, what on earth? So I rang them. And she said, "Oh, can you confirm your address? And we'll post it. It might take 2 weeks." I said, "What's this about?" She said, "You've got a fitness to practice complaint against you." I said, "You can't leave me waiting 2 weeks."
For 2 weeks.
You just can't leave me waiting 2 weeks. That can't be right. So went round the houses, did a few identity checks, and she said, "I'll email it to you right away." So 3 hours later, she emails through this fitness to practice allegation. In May of last year, I fitted a denture to a lady on the Thursday. Fitted the denture at 12:30 on the Thursday. 8 o'clock on the Friday morning, the lady rang. I booked a review, said, "Wear the denture, a couple of weeks. I'll see how you're getting on in a couple of weeks." 8 o'clock Friday morning, the lady rang, and she wanted to speak to me. She was unhappy with the denture. So busy in surgery, rang back a couple of hours later. 40 minutes I was on the phone to the lady, going back and forth. And she said, "You weren't happy with it." I said, "We've tried this denture 3 times. I feel I've done the best I can. I've given it my all, and you've only had it for 8 hours. I want you to wear it a bit more, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks, see how you're getting on." And she, I said, "Look, got to wear it. Please wear it." She said, "My friends and family have told me I look absolutely ridiculous." I said, "I'm really sorry that you've had that feedback. You've only had it 18 hours. It's going to feel different. Wear it. I'll see you a week on Thursday, see how you're getting on." She cancelled the review with me, and I just didn't really think anything more of it. 4 days later, she wrote a handwritten letter to the General Dental Council accusing me of being unfit for practice because she was unhappy with the denture that I've made. It took the GDC from May to October to bring that to me.
Wow.
And then I obviously panicked, absolutely blind panic. I printed it all off, and I mean everything. You mean everything. Everything since that patient has joined the practice 20 years ago. You have to send it all in. On the 2nd of December, it was reviewed by somebody at the GDC who signed off that there was no case to answer, not unfit to practice, all absolutely fine. And it took the GDC till the middle of February to get that report across to me.
Oh my goodness.
So I suppose in a way, if you say to me, what's your best day in business, it's probably the day I found out that I was allowed to keep working as a dentist.
Yeah.
But I think what's really harrowing in that 9-month process is that doesn't serve anybody. That doesn't help anybody. The delays, the 5 months between the patient reporting an allegation to actually being assessed is ridiculous. The fact that got to the GDC is ridiculous. I still sort of scratch my head and think, who does this process actually serve?
Yeah, it is nonsense, because there should be an interim before it gets to the GDC. And I remember, wasn't there a newspaper advert a couple of years ago where basically the GDC paid for all these adverts that effectively were saying, are you unhappy with your dentist? Yeah. If so, get in contact with you. And you sort of think, isn't the GDC, not wishing to be political, there to obviously protect the patient but support the dentist? I mean, it should be supported. You look at the BMA.
I don't. I mean, that process just needs urgent reform. I mean, I think from top to bottom with it, really. I mean, obviously, there's been so much made about recruitment and retention crisis, and we've got hundreds and thousands of dentists trying to register with the GDC, but it's just overly complicated, drawn out, delays. And you have to question who is this serving at the moment. But the worst thing about that is that I was one of only 11% that get thrown out at that stage, and I know how that made me feel. Wow. That made me sort of, because that's your livelihood. It's not only is your livelihood, it's your mortgage, it's everything.
But I think it's no wonder. Sorry, Andy, I was going to say, it's no wonder, isn't it, that when we hear anecdotally people saying, practice owners or older associates saying the new guys coming out of dental school just aren't very good, quick, but they're really good at writing notes. They call it the defensive dentistry, isn't it, to protect themselves from issues that you have. And as you say, if it's never dealt with quickly, then you need to have that protection. I mean, we used to work in banks, and one of the things that we used to say from our legal teams was we would quite often, if we lost a case, it was normally because no one wrote any notes. Yeah. So, but dentists, we hear these young associates are really good at note taking.
Yeah, I mean, something's gone wrong there, because that all takes away from patient care, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And we've all gone into dentistry to help patients. At what point does that GDC process help patients? I'm not sure.
I think the shame of it is, as you tell the story, is the time it takes from that. What would have been a 2-week delay for the letter, but moved on to becoming an email. That stress of having that hanging over you while you're waiting for it to get there, that's unacceptable, and that has to be streamlined and expedited, so we don't have dentists having that build-up of stress. But also, it obviously took its toll on you, because you were able to recount the days and the dates and the times of what happened. It's a massive part of your life, because like you say, effectively, it could
Life
be
goes on hold, doesn't
the thing is, it could be career ending.
Yeah.
Depending on what the outcome is, it could be career ending. So when you've got a practice and a team and family and bills and commitments, to have that hanging over you for month after month after month it's completely unfair.
I do hope that there will be some reforms, and I hope that nobody has to go through something so spurious as that. I sort of tell myself that if you see 50, 60 people a day, somebody's not probably going to like you very much. But does that mean that they should have the ability to just absolutely spin your life upside down like that? I don't know.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think for lots of people that would be a really interesting listen, because there's lots of kind of stories of the GDC and fitness practice, but actually to hear a first-hand account of what it was like and how it affected you, and it's fabulous there was a positive outcome, because it sounded like it was absolutely a spurious claim. Just
as a sort of parting comment on that does loop into the direction that I'm taking my practice. If I'm leaving myself open to complaints by 50, 60 people a day, you have to question the future of your practice, and it does link into why we are reducing our NHS commitment. I would rather see 15, 20 people a day and be absolutely sure that they're happy with the service, happy with the product or what have you, than seeing 50 people a day and worrying, thinking, I've got 3 people waiting, I need to speed this conversation up.
But that's a real disconnect between, it appears in the House of Commons where there's constant debates about access to dentistry and how do we improve access. And then on the other side, we're not getting the profession being perhaps supported and protected in the way they should be.
Yeah.
So, the boots on the ground are saying, well, actually, I'm running my own independent business and I need to do a risk assessment. And by seeing fewer patients where I can control that environment better than churning out lots of dentistry, that's a safe environment to work in. And that you end up with this disconnect of, well, how do you kind of round that circle?
You don't, and I think that's why we are here in 2023 going round in circles, and there's fewer and fewer people in that circle willing to do work in those circumstances, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
So just going back to your practice, you've now been in there as a principal for a while. What would you say are the myths of owning a dental practice? We see lots of stuff on,
it's less stressful, mate.
Yeah, we see lots of stuff on social media, and everybody there seems to be kind of this movement that kind of says, you're an associate, and at some point you've never really made it until you become a principal, which I think is nonsense anyway. I think just being a dentist is an incredible thing to be in your own right. But what are the myths that people think that owning a practice are all the good stuff that isn't
less
real?
stressful, more time and more money.
Let's
challenge those ones.
I think they're all absolutely wrong.
There we go.
To be honest. I know I'm meant to be flying the flag for young associates going to become principals, but I'm struggling to give. No, I think I've heard you say numerous times, both of you, about how when you become principal, you are the finance manager, the HR manager, and actually you're doing these things in 2% of your time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I spend my morning commute, my lunch times, racking my brains, thinking about the next steps, the next things to do with the practice. You are always worrying about something, whether that's staffing, whether that's equipment, whether that's, I'm currently investigating extending the practice, whether it's negotiating with area teams, which I've been doing for 10 months and counting. You're always... And I look back to those days of being an associate where you might worry about that denture that you fitted. You might worry that Mrs. Smith's a bit sore after that extraction, but actually you'd got over it by 5:15.
Yeah, so you went home at 5. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas this is checking your emails of an evening. This is coming in on a weekend to meet contractors.
You've obviously still got you've still got a young family, Oliver. Are you able to switch off? Are you able to kind of have that delineation where there are periods where you aren't working? And I don't mean physically, I mean mentally. Is it always ticking away in the background?
Yeah, I think it is. And if I'm honest, I think I thought I would have been able to switch off more, and I would have had more of a work-life balance by this stage in my principal journey. I'm coming up to 2.5 years now, and I think always thought 2 years first couple of years will be tricky. They'll be hard, but then it'll be...
I'll get it sorted.
Yeah, I'll get it sorted. It'll all run itself like clockwork. And in reality, it's the boiler last week. It's one off on sick next week, and it doesn't matter. I know obviously we talk about having good managers in place and delegating, but ultimately when it's your business, when it's your bank loan, when it's your mortgage on the line, it's on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Whether you might not make the day-to-day decision on how it works or what goes through, it's on your head. And I think, probably the myth would be that you'll have a tough couple of years and then it's all fine and dandy from there. Because,
but you're still smiling, and to me, you genuinely look like you're enjoying it. It doesn't sound easy, but it does sound like you're enjoying it. And I think sometimes things that are hard, as long as we're taking joy from it and it's delivering, we don't mind doing it. Yeah,
definitely.
I think one thing that I maybe wish I knew a little bit more about is sort of the, excuse the pun for the podcast, but the business of dentistry and the politics of dentistry. Do you like that one?
Thank you very much. Yeah,
because I thought I knew a lot about it. I thought I understood a lot about it, but actually, even in terms of like how NHS pay statements work and schedules work and the split and patient charge revenue and all the bits of superannuation, I've learned so much from those just by being the one that has to know about them. And
I
likewise,
suppose sorry, Oliver, that's a real interesting one. I never really thought about it to a certain degree. But as an associate, you never see that.
No.
you have
Something like, this is how many UDAs you've done. Boom.
you have no idea that actually some of that has been taken in patient charge revenue, some of it's not, how that
interesting,
works,
yeah.
how that impacts what you're getting paid on the first of the month, the next month.
Yeah.
You just completely
But I
Cash
think
flow.
but also I think that's the difference between the kind of the theory and the practical application.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
you can't learn to swim standing on the edge of a swimming pool, just
No.
swinging your arms around. You've got to get wet. And I think the difference is when it's your business, you have to understand it. Just having a basic idea of what it is and living it and breathing it on a day-to-day basis are two completely different things.
Yeah, I'd agree. Even down to my bank repayments and the fact that the chunk of capital repayment is classed as income for you. So, you might have I don't know, the business might make 100. You might draw £100,000 out of the business, but if you've been paying £2,000 a month to your bank, in the interest of HMRC, that's income. So you're getting taxed on it, even though you don't have it. It's just little things like that I thought I understood, but I didn't. And then that's before you get into the politics of dentistry. And I think the biggest sort of struggles that I've been really negotiating with the area teams, trying to get some traction, and sort of you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. And that just understanding how our commissioners work and the people that are responsible for NHS dentistry. That in itself is just a completely different world that I had no idea about.
I think, fortunately, in dentistry, there are some great specialist support providers out there. And there's a phrase, isn't there, learn from your mistakes. I think it's a crap phrase. I think you should learn from other people's mistakes. And I think if there's people that have trodden the path before you, whether they're accountants or lawyers or brokers or whoever, if they have knowledge in this area, you should lean on those people, because in the early days when you're trying to find out so much stuff and you're also developing your own personal leadership skills in terms of managing a team, if there's other people that can take some of that kind of stress away from you in terms of understanding the numbers, we might as well use those people, because then it enables us to focus on the stuff where we really make an impact, which is continuing to deliver your clinical dentistry, making sure that the culture in your team is positive. Because if you end up going down dark alleys and trying to work on numbers and that's not your forte, but somebody else can do it, it's drawing on those people that have got those specialist skills.
Yeah, I find it absolutely crazy that there are people out there who purchase practices without a dental specialist lawyer.
It's mad.
That there are practices out there that don't have dental specialist accountants. That just is absolutely crackers. I mean, I use a NASDAL accountant. I value their insight into how sort of the clawback and stuff like that. You really do need to rely on.
It's a complicated business.
It is, yeah, but
accident waiting to happen, I think, if you don't use the right advice.
Yeah,
an enjoyable one nevertheless.
Absolutely.
Yeah, true.
Oliver, your story is brilliant.
Thank you.
I think that so much has happened over a relatively short period of time.
It's not very long, is it? Really?
No, and it, like I say, it's fascinating. But people's life stories always surprise me. People think, "Well, I've got nothing to say," and when you start digging into it, everyone's got an amazing backstory that kind of explains why they are where they are today. We always finish up in the same way. We always ask our guests the same two questions just for a bit of consistency. And the first one we have is, if you could be the fly on a wall in a situation somewhere, where would you be and what would that situation look like?
So for my sins, outside of being a husband and a father and a practice owner, I'm also a very avid village cricketer. Make up for my lack of skill with enthusiasm and exuberance. And if you were to say, if you could be the fly on the wall in any situation, I would go back to the 25th of August 2019, which was the day that Ben Stokes provided his heroics at Headingley, because that provided me with, you talk about not being able to take your eyes off something. You could not take your eyes off that game of cricket. And I probably would want to be a fly on, I'm going to go with Jack Leach's shoulder as he walked down the steps at Headingley to 30-odd thousand drunk Yorkshiremen to meet up with Ben Stokes in the middle and find out those conversations, what they said to each other. Because when I bat, it's just a bit of a keep going. Whereas I imagine there was probably some slightly more inspirational words, and obviously just to see what they sort of said to each other when they got England over the line. So yeah, I'd go with Ben Stokes at Headingley. See what they said to each other.
Haven't had that one before.
No. And I don't know if there's going to be a connection here or we're going down a different path. But if you could meet anybody, who would you like to meet given the opportunity?
Alive.
No. So staying on the same subject, I'd love to have met Shane Warne, the late great Australian leg spinner. I think
not in a bar.
Yeah, in a bar, ideally, in a bar. Although, based on the stories about him, I don't think it necessarily needed to be in a bar. I think just actually anywhere.
Just anywhere.
I think what he did for the game of cricket, he made it exciting. He was a character. He got himself into trouble a couple of times. He lived quite an interesting lifestyle outside of the sport, and he took away the reputation of sort of cricket being kind of boring. And I'd love to have met Shane Warne in a bar, but if not, absolutely anywhere. I'm sure he'd bring
just
me
anywhere.
He was definitely a big character, wasn't he?
So Shane Warne for me.
Brilliant. Oliver, it's been an absolute joy. It's been great. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your honesty and your candour as well. I think the stories you've told are
very helpful.
They're going to really help people. And like I say, I think it's real kind of, on the ground opinion of buying a practice, selling a practice, your fitness practice side of things. I think everything. I think it's got so many elements that are really relevant and important for people who own practices or who are thinking about buying a practice or just generally within dentistry. So we really appreciate your time today. So are you in clinic today?
I am, yeah.
Excellent.
Busy. Couple of people waiting. So thank you very much for your time, gents.
No, not at all. It's been really good talking to you.
Thanks, Oliver.
Cheers, Oliver.
Brilliant.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.